Lewis Hamilton is a Formula One race winner once again. Was there ever any doubt? Yeah, even for himself. He now has 104 wins in Formula One, and also 9 wins at Silverstone, making him the first driver to obtain 9 wins at one circuit. On a day of always changing conditions between dry and wet and then dry again, how ironic that Lewis Hamilton would end his win drought, taking him back all the way to Saudi Arabia in 2021. That's a total of 945 days without a win, but during a weekend where the Hollywood cameras were out in full force to record scenes for the new Formula One film, ironically that Hamilton is also a part of, it was he that wrote his own story and surely gave himself confidence moving forward into the rest of 2024. He is now the only driver ever to win a Formula One race after they've started their 300th Grand Prix. Can you guess the other drivers that actually reached 300 starts? Sebastian Vettel, of course, he has 300 starts. Then Michael Schumacher, he has 308 starts. Jenson Button has 309. Rubens Barrichello, he's got 326. Kimi Räikkönen, well, he's all the way up at 353. And then at the top of the list is Fernando Alonso. He has 392. None of those drivers, though, have won a race after their 300th start. Can Fernando Alonso win a race this year? We'll see. For reference, Lewis Hamilton is on 344 starts, so he's still got a fair way to match Fernando Alonso. Both of Lewis's parents were there to watch him win, and the fact that it was at Silverstone, his home race, is actually quite fitting. As you can imagine, he was emotional on the radio, as expected, both him and his engineer Bono.
Thank you so much, guys. It means a lot. It means a lot to get this one. A big thank you to all the fans here. Love you guys.
He's now 39 years old, and it's expected that when you get to that age and you're no longer winning, you doubt yourself, especially considering his struggles in qualifying, which are well documented, especially this year, with Russell definitely having the edge in that area. He's lost none of his race pace though. If you look at the races where it's equal, like for like, with no damage on either side, Lewis is usually able to manage his pace and the tyres better than Russell, but he's been qualifying so poorly that he's always too far out of position. Maybe this win will give him some confidence, as although McLaren could have opted for a better strategy, the race was won on pace. And let's not forget, in that final stint, Hamilton and Norris were both on the soft tyre, but Hamilton was able to keep up a pace that Norris simply couldn't, with too much tyre deg, and he ended up finishing about 7 or 8 seconds behind Lewis. It was as much a win for Bono and Mercedes though as it was for Lewis. Peter Bonington, known as Bono, being by the side of Lewis Hamilton since 2012. Before that, he was the race engineer for Michael Schumacher. Lewis took him to the podium to lift the trophy because this win means more than just ending a drought. This is the last season they're going to be working together, as Hamilton of course departs for Ferrari next year, and Bono is not set to join him. Not only that, but this was the last British Grand Prix that Lewis will take part in for the Brackley squad. Being based locally, despite being a German manufacturer, it's a home race with a British driver, and the last time he will race for the team. He's been with them a long time and won a lot for himself and the team. To end his drought at Silverstone, well, it's what movie scripts are made of. What a race. Mercedes, second win in a row. Who saw that coming at the beginning of the year? But this one will be a lot sweeter because, not to take anything away from George Russell last race, he was in the right place at the right time and he put himself there. But if it wasn't for Max Verstappen and Lando coming together, they wouldn't have had that win. Silverstone, they were both quick. Both cars, obviously George struggled a little bit in the slippery conditions when the rain started to come down. He did eventually fall to 4th before he was sadly retired from the race with a water issue, but he was also very quick. Both Mercedes drivers were on pace this weekend, and that's the important thing to take. The Mercedes do like lower temperatures. They tend to do worse in warmer temperatures, and as you can imagine with the rain, it was quite cold at Silverstone. But they will take a lot of positives from this race weekend, even George, knowing that that car is now challenging for wins on pace. And they're also, at some circuits, maybe struggling a little bit more, but they're there or thereabouts to pick up the pieces. George will obviously be quite disappointed with what happened, naturally. McLaren, though, I feel have had one of, if not the fastest car at numerous races now since Miami, and they haven't really capitalized on it. There's a couple of key points I just want to talk about that I think they went wrong, and I'm sure most of you will agree with me. First of all, absolute madness to not double stack both cars with Lando and Piastri. I can't fathom why they would do it. Zach Brown said after the race, and so did Andrea Stella, well, we thought we would do this, and in hindsight, it was a lot slower. Anyone could tell you that it would be slower. If you're having to pit Lando because the track is too wet, losing, let's say, anywhere from 2 to 5 seconds with Piastri having to double stack behind his teammate is clearly going to be a lot less than staying out on the wet track for a whole lap. It's a long circuit as well. I think George lost about 6 seconds having to double stack behind Lewis, which is why it was so important from Lewis's perspective to get ahead of George before the pits, because otherwise he would have been in that situation and he wouldn't have won the race. But going back to McLaren, George lost about 6 seconds, but they both had poor pit stops. There was well over 3 seconds for both. We've seen double stacks done pretty well before. You can lose maybe 3 or 4 seconds. In the end, when Piastri did his pit stop a lap later, he was a whole pit stop. Lando was right behind him on the track. He was a whole pit stop behind. And after pitting on the mediums at the final part of the race, he was the quickest guy on track. He was miles behind Lando. He bridged that gap at the end of the race. So frustrating from his perspective, because his race was entirely ruined. He was ahead of Lewis at this point as well by that strategy call. Then at the end, of course, there's a key point to remember. Mercedes had softs and hards. They had no new mediums. Red Bull went onto the mediums, onto the hards with Max. McLaren, on the other hand, had saved a set of mediums. They had another set of mediums for this exact scenario. And yet, when it came down to the pit stop, it's hard to understand if this was driver, because Lando did mention softs briefly. So it's hard to understand if it was driver or team. But ultimately, they made the decision to go onto softs when they had a new set of mediums. And it wasn't the right call. I think mediums, Lando probably wins the race. And that's ultimately the difference. We saw how fast Max was at the final part of the race on the hards because the softs were having to be managed so much. But even Lewis and Lando, both on the softs, Lewis was still able to manage them just enough. With mediums, I think Lando does win the race. So from McLaren's perspective, they need now to start making the right decisions, because they've had a car that's been capable of winning races for quite a few races now. And I just think 1 or 2 mistakes have ultimately cost them. A great win for Lewis. It was great to see Lewis and Lando on the podium. Fantastic all round. A lovely, lovely story. Next race is Hungary, and a completely different track in 2 weeks' time. It's actually the first of another double header, Hungary and Spa. So I'm looking forward to that, and we'll see where everyone's at come that weekend. Thanks for watching. As always, I'll see you next time.